My name is Andy Hornby, photographer and vlogger. 17 years ago I started teaching myself photography. Today I travel the UK as a professional wedding photographer, landscape photographer and filmmaker. Learn from my experiences, my mistakes and my tips and advice. Hi, welcome to another video. Today I'm talking about bracketing and HDR, and I don't want you to get confused by this video, because when people talk about HDR they talk about that kind of look on an image that we used to do back in the sort of late 2000s, 2010, that kind of stuff. Really pushed clarity, horrible looking HDR look that this video is not about, so don't get confused by that kind of stuff. I'm not going to show you how to do that. Although it is really easy. There are lots of apps out there that will do it in one click, and I still see the odd image come out of social media that has that kind of look, and that's fine. It's subjective. If that's what you like and it's what people want to click on and like, that's absolutely fine. It's not what this video is about. This video is going to be about using the bracketing in your camera to enhance the final image for a very good reason. We're going to get into that in a second. First of all, I want to say that I was going to do this video yesterday. I was down at Victoria Pier in Southsea in Old Portsmouth. Everything went wrong. I had no SD cards. In fact, I did have SD cards, they were just the wrong ones. They wouldn't record on my camera because they're old SD cards, they're not the right type. It got to the point where my batteries run out, so I was swapping batteries, and you know what, it got really cold and really dark really quick. I did a time lapse and I did do a few shots that I'm going to show a little bit later to show you what I mean by bracketing. But before we get into that, I want to discuss what bracketing is, what HDR is, dynamic range, that kind of stuff, because a lot of people don't really know or really understand, and without the understanding we can't know what we're doing, right? So let's get into that. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about HDR and dynamic range. HDR stands for high dynamic range, and that's the ability for your camera to see the highlights and the shadows at the same time. And the range is the kind of stops of light that allows for that gradient, if you like, of light and dark, and the details to be shown at the same time. So think about this. At the moment I'm backlit by the sun, and to get me exposed, I've had to expose, obviously for me, the background is well overexposed. It's going to happen, right? So the camera itself isn't as good as your eyes. So I could actually turn around and look at the details in the trees across there and the details in the tree here, and all of the light range at the same time. My eyes are good enough to see the details in both. That whole range, my eyes have got such a good dynamic range of light, and the details in those areas I can see. But the camera can't do that. Cameras haven't caught up with eyes yet, unfortunately. I think they're getting there. Some cameras are really good, some cameras aren't so good. Crop sensor cameras aren't that good, unfortunately. You're actually on a crop sensor camera now. You can't see the highlights and shadows at the same time as well as my eyes can. It's about the amount of detail that your camera can pick out of both those areas at the same time. It's called dynamic range. That is a very simplified version of what dynamic range is. Honestly, it can get very technical, but if you think about it like that, it's the range of light source from the darks, in the shadows and in the light areas of your composition, how much of the detail your camera can actually pick out at any one time. So with that in mind, what we can do, we can actually force our camera to take a picture in both the highlights and the shadows, and later on with a bit of software like Lightroom, we can very easily, and I'm going to show you this in a little while so don't go away, very easily combine those images and it give us what we would consider a better image, because we now have detail in the light areas, detail in the dark areas, and the mid-tones. We would have probably taken 3 images, one for the shadows, one for the highlights and one for the mid-tones. Lightroom will combine them later and we'll have a perfect image, hopefully, where we can push the shadows, bring down the highlights and have a pretty good image. Does that make sense? And that's pretty much what bracketing is. Bracketing is just the way that you can either set your camera up automatically to do this, and I'll show you that my camera can do that, or you can actually physically do it manually, and I'll show you that too. I did that yesterday I used my aperture ring on my 14mm lens yesterday, and I got a few stops under and a few stops over, so we got a picture for the midtones, picture for the highlights, and a picture for the shadows. Boom. And in about 2 minutes time, don't go anywhere, I'm going to show you how to combine them in Lightroom really easily and then start working on images. But I just wanted to show you I've got a very good situation here today. I had a good situation yesterday, but didn't have a card unfortunately in my camera to show you the difference between exposing for the highlights and shadows. When we take pictures, normally we expose for the highlighted areas, so anything that's in front of the highlights, which is going to be our sky if we're shooting into the sun, it's going to be dark. And everyone always tells me about my shipwreck images, how do you get them looking so good? But actually all I do is bring up the shadows in Lightroom. That's it. I don't need to do anything for the sky, because I would have exposed for the sky. All I tend to do is bring up the shadows. And because my camera has a good dynamic range, the detail is there. So this all comes down to preference. You may not ever need to use bracketing, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. Just in case you have a camera that's potentially a little bit older, or the dynamic range isn't as good, you may be on a crop sensor camera. Bracketing is a very good way of overcoming the hurdles of keeping the details and the highlights and the shadows at the same time. And that's it. I'll show you in Photoshop. I'm going to take 3 images. It'll be the images I took yesterday of the Victoria Pier in Southsea, and we're just going to have a go at putting them together. It will take literally a couple of seconds, then I'm going to do a full edit of that image, show you how I edit my images, and yeah, should be good. So let's have a look at that. I'll see you shortly. Bye. Okay, here we are in my Sony. This is my 6400, but all of the Sonys I own have the same function when it comes to bracketing, and it's actually really simple. I'm using my Stormtrooper. You see there, it's just in front of the camera, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either hit the FN button, which is the function button, and go into drive mode, you see there, or same thing on the wheel of the on the back there. You can just click left on the wheel and that takes you straight to the drive mode. That's the default function. You can change that if you want to, but I'm not going to do it. All I need to do is go down to where it says bracketing continuous. There is a bracketing standard, which means you have to press once, it will do one exposure, and another one will do the other exposure. But this, in this case, I want bracketing continuous, because what it's going to do is going to take 3 images. You see it says there EV3, so that's 3 evaluative meter readings. So 3 exposures at 2 stops under and 2 stops over. So we'll have a medium, like I said before. We'll have the settings we've got in camera now, which are we're currently slightly underexposed. But it's then going to take a picture 2 stops under and then another picture 2 stops over. So if I click that, it'll give me a 2-second timer. By default in Sony, it's 2-second timer. And you see it's taking 3 images. So if we look at those images, we've got the overexposed, the normal, and the underexposed. And it's that simple in Sony. Okay, so we're back in Lightroom. Here are our 3 images. We've got 1 overexposed images for the shadows under the pier. We've got a well exposed image for the midtones or an overall exposure, and an underexposed image for the sky, which is pretty awesome. Now all we need to do now is select all 3, so hold one down, shift key to the last one, and right click, photo merge HDR, and it's going to do a pretty good job just by itself. You won't need to do anything at this stage, just let it run its course. And here it is, the output version. Looks very nice, very well balanced exposure. We can play with the auto align and auto settings if you so wish. If you're handheld, for instance, you might want to change the auto align settings. And just go for merge and wait for that to render. And here's our image. It is off center because I did do a little bit of aligning beforehand, and it's just reverted back to the original image, so we need to straighten the horizon. Just go into the crop tool and find the straighten tool just there, and just follow the line of the horizon. There, boom, done, simple. You know me, I generally go for a 16:9 crop for my landscape pictures, and I want to crop right into this one a little bit. There's plenty of room to crop in a little bit. I want more of the sky than the ground. I was a bit far away from the sea itself. So this is a good crop for me. I think that's going to be quite okay. And that's pretty much it. I'm now going to go ahead and do a little bit of editing. I'm going to look at the spots on my sensor, get rid of those. I've always got spots on my sensor because I change my lenses all the time out in the open, and you are always going to get spots. There's a little bit of a white bit on the edge there. We are just going to do a little bit of cropping again just to make sure we get rid of that little white edge. Move that in touch. And there, yeah, and it's gone, that's good. We'll continue with our sensor dust removal. I'm just going to fast this forward for you. I've got a lot of sensor dust. What can I say? It's one of those things that takes a while sometimes. I should create a preset for that, to be fair. Never mind. So let's continue with our edits. You'll see that Lightroom has already given us a little bit of an auto edit. Did that in the stages where it combined the three images. We're going to shift that around ourselves, have a play around with the sliders. This will be different for everyone. My image is going to be different to most other people's images. It's just not going to be the same. You just have to find what works best for your current image. Play with the white balance. It was golden hour, so we want a bit of yellow and orange in the sky. We're going to boost the saturation. And or if you want to know what HDR really looks like, that's HDR. What people think HDR is, don't do this. Don't put the clarity right up. Sometimes actually going to the minus clarity in landscapes actually helps out. Certainly going to help the sky. It's going to smooth the sky out. This is my normal kind of adjustments. Give it a little bit of S-curve. I've brought the shadows up slightly for a very slight washed out look. Sharpening a little bit potentially. We'll mask that so the sky doesn't get bombarded with a load of sharpness. Lens correction, yep. Just a touch, maybe just a tad of post crop vignette. We're going to add a few graduated filters here. Add a little bit of colour into the sky, a little bit of magenta. See that there? Bit of boom, just a touch, not a lot. I'm going to take the magenta down, add a bit of blue to the other side. Gives that just a little bit of something. People don't really notice it, but it does just give it a little bit of a touch. I'll leave a bit of blues in the shadows leading into the image, just a touch, but just bring the shadows down a little bit. I don't want the ground to be so well exposed. And the clarity you can bump here. It's going to bring up the highlights a little bit, but it will give a little bit of clarity to the stones, which is quite nice, I think. So where we took the clarity away earlier on, we brought it back in just the foreground. Here what I'm going to do is just boost the saturation a little bit. We're going to add a luminance mask first. So we hold down the Option or Alt key and just see what's masking out there. We're going to take the saturation right up, give it a good little bit of saturation. That's always going to work nicely. And pump in the yellows and a bit of magenta. That's going to give us a nice orange effect. Here's the before and after, if I can find. There it is. So very minute, but just punches it just a little weeny bit. It doesn't need a lot, just a little bit, just to give it that, just a little bit of an edge. Slightly up on the highlights. And that's pretty much it. Maybe a little bit of contrast. I might use the dehaze for contrast. That's always a good option. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And there's not much else I can do to this. I want to show you the before in the normal exposure, what the under the pier looked like. It's very dark. Look at the shadows there. There's no real detail there whatsoever. and in our picture, let's move the crop down slightly. You can see a good bit of detail coming back in there. It actually works really well, and it's not overly done, it's not overly obvious. It just looks normal, and that's the kind of HDR image we're looking for. Not something that looks like we've crunched the clarity really high up. Doesn't look good. Personal opinion, obviously, you know, some people like it. It is a personal preference. It's not my thing. If you do that, that's down to you. Just remember to have a go at bracketing. If your camera doesn't have a very good dynamic range, potentially this is an option for you. Or if maybe you shoot JPEG and you're not getting as good a quality as you would if you shot RAW, you know, this is another good way of combining JPEGs to get the best quality, if you can, out of those using Lightroom. So here's the before and after. That's just after we've done the HDR combined, and that's our edit. Nice. So I want to thank you for watching this video. It's been a pleasure. This is always a good one. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love to teach this kind of stuff. It's real simple stuff, but people often forget how to do it. And yeah, just have a play around, have a mess. Take some bracketed shots and put them into Lightroom and just give it a whirl. Have a good little edit, and hopefully I'll see some of your pictures in the future, maybe on my workshop group, which is linked in the description down below. So if you got anything out of this video, please whack a thumbs up. That would be fantastic. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Hit the notification bell so you get updates every time I upload a new video, and I will hopefully see you on another video very soon. Take care. Bye.